Hello to Nursing 342 students. Dr. Hastings here, and I want to offer you a summary overview of the critique process. We've been building on that in the discussion questions within the course, but now that we are here in the middle of the course, arguably I'm doing this actually in week 7 when your attention is more on thinking about an exam that we have that was moved to this Friday. But the trajectory as we move forward, besides a couple more exams, is this critique paper and what we've been building when you've been working on pieces of the paper you chose during the beginning of the course and into the discussion questions each week. All right, so let's just talk about it for a few minutes in basic terms. All right, this is a pretty quick video, and I'm using a screencasting platform, Screencast-O-Matic, that you are accessing a link to that I have on YouTube. I find this far easier and more practical than using the Panopto tool that is integrated into the D2L Live platform. At one point, I'll get to know that, and of course, that's where you see your recorded lectures created and posted each week that Dr. Victor did for this course. But for my purposes and be able to communicate with you in a brief video in an asynchronous learning environment, this seemed to be the most practical for me and something I've used for several years. So, all right, relative to the process. So what are critique research reports? Well, of course, it's all about looking at a paper, and all of you have chosen either a qualitative or a quantitative paper, the two that we offered that are more rooted in nursing education in this course. And what are we doing with that? Well, were those studies conducted in a way that they're really going to be relevant for what we're trying to learn in a nursing education landscape? Are they useful as far as the notion of a report to looking at the study itself, the design, and being able to, again, give some kind of, I'll call it vetting, that substantiates that. And of course, all that leads to quality. Is there quality that is subsumed through this whole critique research process? So this is the why we do this. Why are you engaged in a weekly exercising of this process, an exercise that's breaking down the pieces of the papers that you chose, and you're commenting on the other one then too, to get an appreciation for developing a critical eye and the ability to effectively understand what is quality research in general. All right, so within this process, the research critique, and we have it framed as a 2 to 3 page critical appraisal. Now, see the guidelines that we have posted. They're posted in week 10, so they're out there then to look at relative to this assignment. So I'm going to refer to those at the end of this brief presentation. But what is it doing? It's outlining the strengths and weaknesses of the study. That's really basically all you've been doing in the discussion threads, and what we're doing now, what you're going to be doing, that paper critique. We are evaluating the research process, in effect, and that's why I highlighted that. We're looking at, again, was a good research process engaged in by the authors in terms of what they did? Is it pertinent? Is it of quality? Does it apply to what we're trying to learn? All right, so that's really the gist of it. So some basic tips about this, like when you're writing your paper. All right, so look, it's relevant that you act like a person who is reviewing an article. And I just got an offer from a journal I've been connected to for, oh my goodness, almost 10 years now, the Journal of Psychosocial and Mental Health Nursing. So I'm one of the reviewers for that journal, and they periodically, I'm going to say like 3 or 4 times a year, send me an invite to review a paper. And it's more often than that some years and less often than others. It's based on the number of submissions they have. People are trying to get published. And this is a nursing journal. And there's a lot of nursing journals, and a lot of our faculty, like Dr. Victor, do the same kind of thing, or have actually even served on editorial boards for journals then too. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to be collegial to our peers, or conveying interest, but we're going to be also pretty critical, all right, in that process. So we emphasize points of excellence. We refer to in a critique and a review we're doing, fairly clearly what we think is good, but also what we think is less good. All right, and we provide justification of comments and include supportive comments. That's sort of like what I do to your discussion question posts on a weekly basis. That is our discussion where it's like a workshop. We're trying to do a build here. We offer some practical suggestions, and I would say ahead of your critique paper, you can be more engaged with me in that process than you've been. We've been doing these discussion questions. That's subsumed, again, our discussion within the class, since this is a virtual class and takes place asynchronously within a hybrid type of format, of course, for this. But in all that, be proactive. Like, reach out to me. I've mentioned once or twice before. Office hours, I'm certainly available, especially Wednesday nights. If people want to reach out and to meet with me, that would be great. But Tuesday late mornings, Thursdays, that type of thing then too. But individual meetings, I can be around it. So definitely go there. So I can be more concerned in offering some practical suggestions about what you're doing and be empathetic. Now we're just back on topic for what we're doing in this. Hey, to doing a good critique, and that's the way you're like writing your paper. It's almost like you're writing a review to somebody who submitted a journal for review. But that's where a critique is. And our guidelines sort of subsume that at one level, but really it's not that specific. I mean, it is just a classroom assignment. So this is coming from your book. This is coming from the Fain book, these kind of suggestion, the idea if you're taking this posture. And I think it would be good that you do that, even though this is a classroom assignment. It's sort of like you're doing it in real time. All right, so let's get to the specific things. What are we looking at? Problem statement. Already reviewed this then a bit and see where I've highlighted here the important things then too. Research methodology. What are the things that really matter here? We focused this past week on sample, and I think that's big. Knowing what the design is around that, and then the process of data collection, that's coming up for us. But it all starts with the problem statement, ultimately. And that we did a couple weeks ago, looking at, again, particular significance and purpose of that. So I think that's big. And then once we get to the results section, looking at the analysis, is the analysis pertinent? Does it give us good findings, so to speak, where we can really interpret them in a meaningful way? And what are the implications that flow from that, let alone future study aspects that we'd be concerned with? So we're getting to that, and that's really an important consideration in terms of our appreciating this. We do not need to be expert statisticians. We do not need to be experts in research process to be able to appreciate these kind of things. So, all right, so the critical components, and your textbook does a very nice job of this, whether you're looking at it in the hard copy or the electronic copy, these kind of things flowing from problem statement, flowing from design was subsumed within methodology and sample in that context then too. All right, and then to results, conclusion, interpretations. There's another view of it, table 15.2 in there. And then the details, all right, now they give basically an outline detail of a critique. You know that in our paper critique guidelines, you don't need to be as detailed as this, but these are the kind of questions you should be asking and the basic type of considerations for the setup for the paper. Not this specific, not this perfect. Remember, you're not even doing an abstract for this, by the way. This is a critique, and this is the kind of theme that you're going to approximate or approach in terms of the flow, the layout progression, so to speak. What are you focusing on when you're writing this? So these could be logical headers for your paper, actually, when you lay it out that way: problem statement, conceptual framework, all that, in terms of how this flows. Now, the literature, you're just going to do a gloss over that. That's not part of a research process. That's sort of like the foundation for what the authors are coming off of in terms of problem and then design and purpose, in terms of where they're going to with the study. So we don't need to be as deliberate with that. And then it all just flows. And I still think we start with problem statement, but then the research questions, what do they look like? It's going to be different, qualitative versus quantitative. And then the design, sample, and then the methodology moving forward. So we don't need to dwell on this, all right? And there's some overlap between the screenshots I embedded here. But these are relevant considerations and questions that you should be asking. So that's our hope. Okay. Hang on one second. Okay, it looked like my recording had stopped there for a moment. I wasn't sure why. Okay, so in all this, trying to subsume these things is meaningful in terms of the basic elements of what you're trying to address within the context of your paper critique and in that build. All right, now they do refer to a research appraisal checklist. All right, way more detailed. All right, so this expands even a little bit more. All right, but it does identify the steps. So sort of like that outline summary I just showed you, all right, this very detailed 50 statements, 8 categories. Yeah, again, look at them, but don't be a perfectionist. So don't get hung up on this. It doesn't need to be that much. Let's look at the components of this relative to how this is laid out. Let me move me over here so I'm not in the way. Again, sort of subsumed in that that overall, those 3 screenshots that I had. Title, abstract, no, you're not doing, I'm including it here because this is a reference, but you're not doing an abstract as per our guidelines. Problem, review of literature, all right, and how that flows within this, okay. Methodology, data analysis, discussion, form, and style. C, bigger labels, bigger tags, easy peasy. All right, much more succinct than even the screenshots I showed you in terms of the overall components here that you're looking at. All right, so in the checklist, though, it's got these specific questions. That sort of looks like that outline we had before with an appraisal and a rating. And in some review situations, this is done. I reviewed for some other journal articles that use this, not for that one I mentioned before currently that uses this. But that whole notion, again, the criteria is about what your approach. That's why when I qualified about abstract, you don't have to write an abstract for your paper, but you are writing about the authors here. Did they write an abstract? And was that clear? So yes, as far as that is concerned, that's really important. Okay. So within those themed areas that we're addressing, proceeding to problem statement, proceeding to, and again, remember, review the literature. For you, it's really just looking at what's current. I think that would be the most important aspects of this that you would get out of it that you would want to comment on. And then methodology, I think there are aspects of this that are good, but don't get too hung up on it. Between subjects in your sample, all right, is it a reasonable sample? And the instruments, do they have reliability reported? All right. And do they seem to be valid? Those would be considerations here then too. All right. And then going into data analysis, some basic considerations relative to that then too within this rating and then discussion. All right. So basically we've looked at the same layout and format of what a critique would be approaching to do in a few different views here. And I think that's what's really important. Here I just add a little bit more to make sure that form and style is included at the end beyond discussion. Okay. All right. So, and that's where we're at. You know, you've got the quantitative paper, some of you, and some of you have the qualitative paper. So that's really the basic gist of it. So the paper, our layout, our format here, let me see if I can move the screen over just a little bit. It definitely looks like this. You know, consider, you know, these aspects to it in terms of our actual guideline structure to it. You're going to have an introductory paragraph. Again, no abstract for you as far as our paper for the critique. And then there are these specific aspects or elements that are underneath that then too. So take a look at those. Again, in week 10, this is laid out with the instructions about this assignment on these areas here again. So I would flip through each of these just to make sure you understand and see how that matches up to the critique guidelines that I had mentioned here in this brief presentation. They mirror that then too, and they give you a little bit more context in each of those as you roll through. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you for your attention, And I wish you well. Get back to me with any questions. Best to all of you.